The investigation is ongoing, but what does Jules discover this week? Let's talk about Silo Season 1, Episode 6, The Relic. Hey everyone, this is David Starr from Watcher Pass, and it's Friday, which means it's another episode of Silo. Let's talk about Season 1, Episode 6, The Relic, which comes to Apple TV Plus on June 2nd, 2023. It continues the investigation into the death of Sheriff Marnes and Mayor Jans, and it lets Jules conduct her own investigation into some personal matters while she's investigating this murder. So, what do I think? Is this episode worth your time? Yeah, it definitely is. My hot take is I think you should definitely watch it. I really like this episode. It had some great world building and intrigue, and it showcased some of the stakes that Jules has accepted as a sheriff, some of the risks that she's taking investigating this and trying to do her own crusade investigation while she's investigating the murder. I really thought it had a nice balance of new information with intrigue, and I just really enjoyed the entire thing. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the episode, a few things I liked. There really wasn't anything I didn't like, and then I'm going to go into a recap. So as you can imagine, there will be spoilers in the recap portion. If you don't want to know what happens in this episode, I would turn it off when I get there, but don't worry, before that, I will keep it vague, I'll keep it spoiler-free. When I get to those spoilers, I will let you know. So in The Relic, you have Jules continuing her investigation into the death of Sheriff Marnes and Mayor Johns, and part of this is the investigation into the lead suspect, this judicial employee named Trumbull, and an investigation into his apartment uncovers something that leads Jules and Billings down a rabbit hole, down some very dark places to try to figure out what this means and how it relates to the overall murder plot. So things I liked about this episode. The first, look, I like Billings. I think he was a great addition. I really like his character. I think he's a fun kind of foil to Jules. He is more by the book. He's more serious. And he's also a little bit more outspoken. She's quieter and more stubborn and more kind of determined to get what she wants done. And I really like seeing their interaction. Plus, this episode, we get some more information on Billings, some more information on his background, and other things that are going to be relevant for the next few episodes. And I really think they fleshed out his character and made him one of my favorites for this series. I really like him a lot. I think he's a great addition, and I'm excited to see what comes next. The second thing I loved is the intrigue. This episode had a lot of intrigue between Jules and the sheriff side versus judicial, and I liked seeing how much influence judicial has. I like seeing how they kind of pull a lot of strings and how they try to force the investigation one way very subtly. And I really like this aspect of Silo. I like some of this intrigue that's happening. I know that's kind of the main point of the series, but I think they do a fantastic job of highlighting it and kind of dropping it here and there without being so explicit about it. The third thing I loved is the world building in this episode. They have a bunch of little hints to talk about the silo and to talk about judicial and how kind of powerful they are. I really think the series does a fantastic job of just slowly trickle feeding information without kind of calling it out. They have this holiday that is happening, this thing called Forgiveness Day, where it's a big event in the silo. They don't ever really have a major kind of explanation of it. You just kind of get information about Forgiveness Day from the context clues, from the way that they talk about it in the episode. And I really love that. I love how they don't try to hold the viewer's hand. They just let the viewer live in this world and find out more as everyone else kind of finds out more, and as everyone else kind of experiences the silo, so does the viewer. And I really love this method of storytelling, and I love how it trusts the viewers to kind of experience the show without needing to hold their hand. And the last thing I loved about this episode, the ending. It is a really good ending. It is a surprising ending. It is definitely going to have reverberations for the next few episodes. And I will not go into that right now because I will have to save that for the recap. But just know that Silo Season 1, Episode 6 comes to Apple TV Plus on June 2nd, 2023. Definitely check it out. It is a really good episode and a necessary one for the rest of the season. Look, we're already halfway done with this season, and I'm excited to see where it goes. So check it out, and I'm going to go into the recap right now. If you don't want to know what happens in this episode, turn it off now. There will be spoilers. There will be spoilers. There will be spoilers. So like I said, this episode starts with Jules and Billings' investigation into Trumbull and what may have motivated him to kill Sheriff Marnes and Mayor Johns. So they break into his apartment and investigate, and while they're there, they find this old relic, this Pez dispenser that was in Trumbull's medicine cabinet. They take this and kind of look into it, try to figure out what this means, and there's no record of it in the kind of standard database of information. But Billings, who knows the pact, knows that if they have an illegal relic, even if it's for an investigation, they need to turn it over to judicial and get permission to do a relic investigation. And so he kind of forces Jules to go do this. They head to judicial, and we finally get to see who this Judge Meadows is, this person that's been talked about many times. We get to meet her. She seems like she is very busy and also not super caring about what is going on. She complains about how she needs to leave soon or else she's gonna have to like walk down to her house in like bad foot traffic. So she doesn't seem like a super interested party, but Judicial is very powerful. You get lots of hints throughout this episode that they're powerful. For the first one, when they try to go into Trumbull's apartment, he asks, "Oh, is this a Judicial employee? Because if that is, I have to get an entire separate set of keys," which I think shows that Judicial kind of plays by their own rules. There's also a ton of aspects of the pact where you have to get Judicial's special permission. Judicial seems to kind of run a lot of aspects of the silo. We already knew that, but this episode only helps to kind of like highlight that. But when they go down to Meadows, through some creative discussion, the Judicial sanctions a Relic investigation into this Pez dispenser relic, which lets Jules then kind of go off on her own and explore more about this relic and the kind of world of underground relic selling. Relics are just things from, I guess, before the silo. Basically, anything from Earth before everyone went down to the silo. A lot of it's junk. Like this is an old Pez dispenser, but no one up here knows what this is. No one has any basis for what this relic could be. And so they're all intriguing and they're all apparently dangerous to the overall silo. So Jules does this investigation. She goes to some of her contacts and tries to find the name of someone who would be like a relic broker. And she gets this person, Regina Jackson, which Jules goes to visit. And while we're there, we find out that Regina was an ex-girlfriend of George, who famously was with Jules before he died, and now he is kind of the reason that she is investigating his death. She thinks it's a murder. We find out that George, before he was with Jules, was with Regina, and that he used her to get more and more relics. He used kind of her connections and her large family to try to get as many relics as he could. And once he had like used her to get all the relics that he wanted, he then moved on to try to find someone else, which appears to have been Jules. So we don't get a ton of information for this interaction other than Regina was with George before, which I guess is a big revelation, and that she was involved in like the relics trade, and that ended up costing her a lot. It cost her her family. It cost her kind of like a lot of her life, and now she kind of lives alone with a cat in this place without that much interaction with other people. From this, there isn't much more to go for this relic investigation, and Jules and Billings meet with the mayor and Sims. And essentially, the mayor tries to bury this investigation. He basically says, like, look, that all the people know is that the ex-sheriff and the ex-mayor died from some sort of heart condition due to overexertion of walking around the silo. They famously walked basically the entire silo before they died. They're using that as a cover story. The mayor is concerned that if anything new comes out, it could like cause distrust and disrupt the kind of order of the silo. So the mayor tries to bury the investigation. I think Jules is going to still want to continue this. We don't really get a full resolution from that, but we do know the mayor doesn't want them to really look further into this overall death. So now after this scene, Billings kind of confronts Jules and basically accuses her of planting this relic, because this relic, this Pez dispenser, was George's before. And then it just mysteriously showed up at Trumbull's apartment. And Jules basically admits that, yes, she did plant it. She made sure that Billings found it so that he could be kind of like the neutral starter of this investigation and allow Jules to look more into George and his death through kind of the guise of using this relic. Billings is a little upset because him finding an illegal relic, him being part of this, puts his job and his life at risk. And so he gets upset with her, saying like she has to be honest with him. She can't like keep him in the dark. And she turns the tables on him. She basically, ignores the question and says, "Oh, you want to be honest? Well, Jules has noticed that Billings has the syndrome, this unspoken syndrome. It kind of affects your hand. They shake. I think it affects the amount of exertion you can do. It's this syndrome in the silo that should prevent him from being a deputy." And Jules is like, "You try to hide it, but I've noticed it." Basically calling him out, saying like, "Oh, you're all high and mighty, but you're lying here and you're committing a crime by being a deputy sheriff with that syndrome." She's not going to like out him, but I think she uses it to put him in his place and show that she knows more than he's laying on. That's a little mean. Billings has been pretty good overall, and he's been supportive of Jules the entire time. So it's a little backhanded on her part, but I think she is just also upset that Billings got mad at her. So after this, Billings goes back to his house, and we get to see his wife and his daughter. And his daughter is super cute. He seems like a really great family. And we also find out that his wife knows about the syndrome and has been helping him conceal it. She asked like if he took his ginger root to help with his shakes, and he's like, "No, I couldn't. I was like occupied the entire day." So she helps to like give him his ginger root and then calm him down, calm the syndrome down so he can get some sleep. So it seems like his wife is really helping him to suppress the syndrome. And we will see if that comes up later. It also shows that Billings is a pretty good dad because he is very sweet with his daughter. Back to Jules. After this confrontation with Billings, Jules goes up and sees her like friend, I guess, that's always at the window. They have a cute conversation. He implies that he is interested in her. And I think this relationship will probably grow. I'm worried that it's going to end up being like a judicial plant that's trying to get some information from her, or maybe someone that's supposed to like try to watch her. But we'll find out later. We'll find out. We'll see who this friend Lucas is. But he is the person that is always at the window, like sketching the outside world, and always seems to run into Jules late at night. Now, after this, Jules has a flashback with George, and there are several flashbacks throughout this episode where Jules and George are interacting, and it shows that they had like a pretty sweet relationship. They had a lot of fun together. They joked with each other. George definitely used Jules for relics, but I think he seemed to genuinely like her too. He seemed to like spending time with her, and so you get to see some more backstory on their relationship, and it seems pretty genuine. But after this confrontation with Billings, after Jules sees Lucas, we get one last little flashback where Jules and George are kind of laying down in the excavator room, looking up at not the stars, the rock ceiling of this area. And Jules asks George what the big questions are, what the important questions are. And George says a few, but he ends with the biggest question of all, the most important question, which is, what if everything you've been told and everything you've come to know has been a lie? And that's been kind of a theme of the silo throughout. Like, the silo structure is lying to the people about what is happening out there, about it being unsafe out there, about there being like an unfit world out there, and that everyone has to stay in the silo. That has been the theme of the entire show, and it seems like George was thinking about that, and that he maybe planted that seed in Jules, and that's something that Jules now believes. So after this, Jules goes and talks to Walker with her walkie-talkie. She talks to Walker with her walkie-talkie, and basically tells her like it's over, like she's done with this investigation. She found out that George like was not a trustworthy person and not worth the time. And Walker basically is like, yeah, what are you doing? Like, did you go up there to become sheriff just for George, or did you go up for yourself? Like, are you just going to quit now, or are you going to finish this job? And during this interaction, we also get a little hint. We see an old picture of Walker and Judge Meadows. So Walker seems very connected. I'm very curious to know more about her. She knew the mayor. She was an old friend of the mayor. And now apparently she knows Judge Meadows. So she seems to be a very, very connected person that is living way down in the lower levels of the silo. So after this, Jules then goes and reconfronts Regina, this time without Billings there. And when she's there, she accuses Regina of selling out George. Basically, her giving information to Judicial sold out George, which then caused George to be killed over this hard drive that he had. And we saw this hard drive earlier. It had like a picture of the outside world before the whole like silo time. And so George really liked this hard drive. He was using it to he was exploring this hard drive to get some more information. And we think that that is eventually what caused him to be killed by Judicial. Now, Regina says, she talked to Judicial, but that wasn't the one that was like the concerning one. The man who came at night was the big concerning one. There was apparently this person that would come at night who knew everything. He knew everything about like what she was doing. He would quiz her on things. If she like went out and talked to people, he would come at night and like tell her who she talked to, basically showing that he like knew everything about her. And he pressed her for names, and every name that she gave him would be another day that Regina's mother wouldn't have to work in the mines down below. So she was doing it to save her mother's life. But by doing that, she ratted out a bunch of relic sellers in the silo. And then we also find out that George traded Regina something very, very valuable for the hard drive. George really wanted this hard drive, and he gave Regina this old like book that Regina says was like everything. Regina hid it in like her doormat. When Judicial would come to search her place, they would turn everything over, but they wouldn't actually look into the doormat. So in the doormat was this old like book, like leather bound document of some sort that Regina says contains everything, and she gives it to Jules. I don't know why she just gives it to Jules. That seems like a strange gesture, but hey, you know what? Whatever, it works. And then surprisingly, after Regina tells Jules that this person watches her and knows everything that she does, and that this relic is like super valuable, like super important, could get her killed, Jules just walks back to her house with the relic out exposed. Like she enters her doorway and the relic is like out there is this like leather bound book. Now it looks just like a leather bound book, but if this is so valuable, she should have hidden it. Like throw it in your shirt or something. Do something to hide it. But anyways, Jules gets back with the relic, opens it up, and it appears to be a travel guide of Georgia before the Silo times. Like just your standard travel guide, but for Jules, this is a revelation because there's pictures of the outside world. There are activities. There are people like out enjoying the world without like masks and protection. And there's like animals that she's never seen. This is just like this foreign manuscript that she starts looking through and starts reading. And while she's reading this, the camera pans out to look like you are looking through a TV or like a security monitor. And then you see that we are in this room with all these monitors throughout the silo and these two people who are watching these monitors. And you don't know where this is, but they say essentially that they have to wake this person. And, you know, well, one person says you have to go wake him. And he's like, and the other person's like, well, it's so late. And they're like, he needs to see this. So this is probably this shadow person that came at night. He appears to be some sort of observer, maybe like overseeing the activities of the silo to try to make sure that no one is misbehaving. And we find out that Jules's house is being monitored and Jules's house has a camera in it. So big revelation, there is this crazy shadow person and there is someone who's watching over at least prominent individuals in the silo. We don't know how many are being watched, but at least we know the sheriff is being watched. I imagine other high-ranking people are being watched. So who this person is, what they do, we don't know. We'll have to wait till next week to find out, but that is Silo season 1 episode 6. Like I said, I definitely think you should watch it. I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was a very well done one and it had plenty of new information and a lot of intrigue. So definitely check it out when it comes to Apple TV Plus on May 2nd, 2023. And thanks so much for watching. If you liked this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.